This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A global pact on migration is adopted by more than 160 UN member states. The European Union imposes sanctions on the ruling party presidential candidate ahead of DR Congo elections. And uncertainty in the UK after Prime Minister Theresa May delays scheduled vote on Brexit deal. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts, live in Nairobi. Rama joins me now with your business headlines.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi champions African trade and investment within the continent. And the Tunisian Consumer Defence Association is expressing deep concern about the levels of inflation in the country. We'll have the details on that story and plenty more coming up in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. We begin in North Africa, where more than 160 UN member states have adopted the Global Compact on Migration at a conference in Morocco. African leaders who spoke at the meeting have hailed the move to protect human rights. Even though 10 nations have pulled out of the compact, the UN says others are still in consultation with their legislatures. UN Chief Antonio Guterres emphasized there was no legal obligation to support the migration compact, but insisted on the observation of human rights in countries.
May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt draft resolution A/COMP231/L1? I hear no objection. It is so decided.
The compact is not a treaty. Moreover, it is not legally binding. It is a framework for international cooperation rooted in an intergovernmental process of negotiation in good faith that specifically reaffirms the principle of state sovereignty.
In other news, the European Union has extended sanctions against DRC President Joseph Kabila's chosen successor. The measures include an asset freeze and a ban on entering the EU. Kevin Osbeck reports now from Brussels.
These sanctions target 14 people, but one of them is the DRC's ruling party candidate, Emmanuel Ramazan Shadary. The EU first slapped sanctions on him last year for human rights violations. He's accused of helping to lead a brutal crackdown on protests. Back in 2016, when President Joseph Kabila refused to step down after his mandate ended, security forces turned violent on anti-government protesters. Voters, though, will return to the polls later this month, and we'll see if they pick Shadary to lead the country. EU foreign ministers have also stressed it is crucial that elections are credible, inclusive, and reflective of the will of the Congolese people. Kevin Osbeck, CGTN, Brussels.
The European Union sanctions against Emmanuel Ramazan Shadary include an asset freeze and a ban on entering the EU. They were implemented 2 years ago in response to Shadary's alleged role in the obstruction of the DRC's electoral process and reported human rights violations carried out during his time as Interior Minister. The DRC's ruling coalition maintains the measures are politically motivated.
These sanctions, which are political, it means they are not right. This is political. It depends on the interest of European Union. It means for us, as Congolese, that we have probably had an essential interest of European Union. That's why they try to make political press on us. But
last week, the government asked the EU to lift the sanctions imposed on Shadary ahead of the elections, but Human Rights Watch has called for them to be renewed and even expanded. Congolese head to the polls on the 23rd of December to choose a leader to replace President Joseph Kabila. Shadary has been handpicked by Kabila as the ruling party candidate. His main challengers are the opposition party members Martin Fayulu and Felix Tshisekedi. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Meanwhile, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Joseph Kabila, plans to stay in politics when he steps down after the December elections. Kabila says he hasn't ruled out running again for the presidency in 2023. Kabila was due to step down in 2016 at the end of his constitutional mandate. However, the election to replace him has been delayed repeatedly, and until recently it was unclear if he would seek a third term. Instead, Kabila has handpicked Emmanuel Ramazani Shadary as his preferred candidate for the December polls. The long-delayed vote will mark the DRC's first democratic transfer of power and end Kabila's 17-year rule. He will, however, be eligible to run for office again in 2023.
What will be my role after I step down? My role will be to make sure that we don't go back to square one. Square one meaning where we found the Congo 22 years ago. My role will be to do that by advising, by giving all the necessary information, advice to be taken or not taken. In life, in fact, you shouldn't rule out anything, because everything is possible. But the question is, what's the bigger picture? It's not just a matter of running in 2023 or 2024 or whatever. No, I don't think so. So in life, as in politics, I don't rule out anything.
Madagascar's presidential candidates Marc Ravalomanana and Andry Rajoelina faced off in a televised debate ahead of their runoff poll. Rajoelina led his opponent in the first round of voting with around 39% of the vote. It was a heated encounter between the two former presidents. Rajoelina came into power after a 2009 coup, ousted then-President Marc Ravalomanana. Ravalomanana accused Rajoelina of leading the coup, claiming the move caused the Malagasy people to be thrown into poverty. Rajoelina countered by saying Ravalomanana was living in the past. The final round of voting for the presidential poll is set to take place on December the 19th.
I have been elected democratically twice, and you come in saying you are in a hurry to take power.
Every time I have a debate with President Ravalomanana, I am surprised that he always talks about the past, while the Malagasy people expect solutions from us now. What are you going to do to save the country? What is your program to save the country?
An Egyptian lawyer has filed a court case to force Parliament to start a debate on amending the Constitution. The clause that is up for debate will be the one that bars President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi from running for a third term in 2022. A court in Cairo will hold its first hearing on the case on December the 23rd. Egypt's constitution was adopted in 2014 after Mohamed Morsi was ousted from his presidency. Sisi was elected president later that year, and this year the incumbent won a second four-year term in office.
The Court of Urgent Affairs is not specialized to look into the presidential terms. The legal measure to extend the presidency is the Constitution. A committee in Parliament must be formed to study the amendment, recommend what should be changed. Parliament must approve a call for the public referendum. It's the people say, it's not a decision of any judge or any court. That's the only legal way through which an extension in presidential terms should be passed.
People are economically suffering. We need something that would make us earn a good income so we can choose him once again. We can't sustain that pressure. I can support an extension to his presidency if it's good for the country. He has restored security, but security is not everything. We need economic return. We don't want all resources to go to the army. Let people do business freely.
Let's go back to migration issues now with a story from Senegal. In the country's capital, Dakar, many young migrants are returning home to the suburban neighborhood of Thiaroye-sur-Mer after several setbacks. Let's now take a look.
El Hadj Diop, a 24-year-old Senegalese migrant, is the eldest son of his family. He has been back home since October the 8th, 2018.
I am a fisherman. I earn a living through fishing. We haven't been able to fish in over 3 months because of the fishing agreements signed between our Senegalese government and some European countries. The boats of the Western countries come to our shores every day to gut all the fish in our sea. As a result of that, we often spend a week or two at sea without much return. We are still fighting hard to terminate this agreement.
El Hadj's father, unlike many other parents, encourages his son to go on the cross-Atlantic journey so as to support his family financially.
I am retired and El Hadji is my eldest son. I rely on him for basic needs. I usually encourage him to do everything he can to succeed and help us out of poverty. I know he has suffered a lot during these trips, but if he wants to go back and try one more time, then I support him.
I've tried to go to Europe twice. During the first journey, we passed through Mauritania to reach Spain. We were 129 people in a small canoe. The smugglers asked for about $850 from me. We were then arrested by the police, tortured and imprisoned for 42 days. After being released from prison, we were tried and repatriated to our respective countries. During my second attempt, I traveled to Morocco by plane, and the ticket cost me almost $650. Before I left Senegal, I was able to collect a certain amount of money that my father helped me complete. Once we arrived in Morocco, we tried to reach Spain, crossing the desert with my friends. I paid the smugglers 1,000 euros for this. But again, we were arrested by the police, who mistreated us and stripped us of all our belongings. Some friends and I managed to escape and found ourselves in the desert where we were often hungry. To survive in that place, we had to consume whatever we had on us, even ointments such as shea butter.
In order to encourage young migrants to stay in their country of origin, El Hadj has proposed some solutions to the Senegalese government.
As soon as we returned back home, we asked the government to provide finance development projects for us or find financial partners who can help us. Our request is still pending. I think this is the only way for us to stay in our country without wondering where we will get our daily bread.
El Hadj has not lost hope. He is currently planning to attempt a third journey to Spain. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Well, let's now head to the Moroccan city of Marrakesh now and get the latest on the adoption of a global migration pact from CGTN's Jane Keogh, who is there for us. Jane, give us some highlights building up to the eventual adoption of the compact.
Well, Karen, this has been a prolonged process. UN member countries have actually been debating and negotiating this accord for the last 18 months. Now, of course, this was necessitated by the fact that migration is now a global phenomenon. It's now a global challenge. And it's clear that individual countries cannot really resolve this issue on their own. Of course, there's been challenges. There's been a lot of controversy at the same time. Now, unanimously, countries did endorse this deal in 2016. Unanimously, but along the way this changed. A lot of issues have arisen. Some of them have to do with legal challenges, exactly what happens in future where legal challenges are concerned, where migrants and migrant rights actually are brought up, even though keeping in mind that this is not really a legally binding document. There's also been the issue of some countries have raised concerns with the fact that they say that the compact is actually mixing up issues where migrants and clusters of migrants are concerned. And here they are mentioning the issue of economic migrants, refugees, asylum seekers. It says it really doesn't define how to deal with each and every one of those clusters. But of course, really surprising, this was widely expected. Perhaps the biggest challenge now is what happens next, and that has to do with the implementation.
Well, Jane, as you say, the compact is not a treaty and so it's not legally binding. What are leaders saying about the implementation of this agreement?
Well, countries that have endorsed and those that are supporting have pledged to live up to the accord, even though implementation will actually differ from country to country. Remember, this is not a legally binding document. So what experts are saying, they are saying that this will actually should be seen as a policy making tool, and countries will now have to include it in their policies and agendas moving forward. And this will maybe bring about the issue of money. How do we fund this? How is this funded? Again, this has not really been clearly discussed up to this point. It's not clear how this mechanism or how the implementation will actually be funded. There's also country.
Let's talk about the host country, Morocco. It's central to the migration crisis as migrants see it as the gateway to Spain. What did the country's foreign minister have to say today about the country's role in the support for legal migration?
Well, indeed, Karen, Morocco is bearing the brunt of migration at the moment, especially since Italy and Greece shut down their migration routes. It's become a leading destination for migrants here in Africa. Now, the foreign minister did acknowledge this, and he said, remember, Morocco is one of the countries that have been backing this agreement since the beginning, and he says this is just a beginning, and the challenge is actually on those countries that have actually pulled out. Let's take a listen at the Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita.
Okay, thank you very much. That was Jane Keogh there in Marrakesh for us. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including uncertainty in the UK after Prime Minister Theresa May delays scheduled vote on the Brexit deal. And Congolese doctor Denis Mukwege and Yazidi activist Nadia Murad receive the Nobel Peace Prize.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
My home country lies at the foot of Africa, the southernmost tip of our beautiful continent and the unique point at which two great oceans meet. Now on a clear day in Cape Town, you can just make out Robben Island, the place where Nelson Mandela was jailed for so long. South Africa has changed so much in the years since then, but it is this country's history that shaped me and took me into reporting. I'm inspired by Africa's men and women of courage. It's the everyday hero who brings out my passion. The creatives, the decision makers, the risk takers who are shaping a bright African future. I see them in Cape Town. I see them in the pulsating city of Johannesburg. I see them across the continent, and I know our time has come.
CGTN is a platform where African voices can speak for themselves and take their stories to the world. My name is Lindy Mtongana, and I'm a news anchor and reporter for CGTN.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has called off the planned Tuesday vote on her government's Brexit deal. May cited concerns over the Northern Ireland backstop as the reason for the delay. The backstop is an insurance policy which removed border checks at the Northern Ireland border. May says she'll head back to the European Union to voice these concerns. Without parliamentary support for Brexit, the country is left with the options of an exit without a deal or second referendum on EU membership. Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn said the current Brexit plan is bad for Britain. May said delaying the vote was the right option. Well, for more on this, we are joined by Richard Bestick in London for us. Richard, the decision to delay the Brexit deal vote was anticipated. What more can you tell us?
Well, it was anticipated. If you mean by anticipated, Karen, that we'd been gossiping about it for days, then yes, it had been anticipated. Nobody could understand why the Prime Minister was going to drive her EU withdrawal agreement into certain defeat in the House of Commons, not just defeat, but a massive humiliation. A majority of those against it in 3 figures, it was estimated. Right up until lunchtime, though, Theresa May and her cabinet ministers were all saying, nope, the vote's going ahead. And finally, the gossip came out initially from cabinet members that actually they were, after all, going to pull the motion that would have put it to the vote tomorrow night on Tuesday. And then we went into a situation where we awaited the words of the Prime Minister herself. And as you were saying, she said that she'd been listening, she understood there were concerns, and she was pulling that motion after 4 days of debate on the issue. She was pulling it, and she would be returning to Brussels for a summit there on Thursday and Friday and seeking further assurances from the European Union. Quite whether she gets them is another matter entirely, and how long she's putting off this vote on the withdrawal agreement is another unknown. But for tonight, we know that they will not be voting, that it has been kicked down the road.
Okay, well, so we know she's going to go to Brussels to see what she can do there. What happens next? And just how bad is the political uncertainty for the United Kingdom?
Well, it is a matter of uncertainty. The markets have reacted badly. The pound is down. On the opposition benches in the Houses of Parliament earlier, they were saying that the government is in chaos and this withdrawal of the vote is ridiculous. There are now questions about whether the Prime Minister can keep her job at all, whether she'll keep it long enough to be able to go to Brussels, or whether the opposition benches will be able to force a motion of no confidence, a general election, in other words, Karen, that the very government of Britain could be brought down by this decision.
Okay, so many unknowns there. Thank you very much. That was CGTN's Richard Bestick for us there in London. Moving on to other news now. This year's Nobel Peace Prize winners Denis Mukwege and Nadia Murad have collected their awards in Norway's capital, Oslo. Both Dr. Mukwege and Ms. Murad are activists against the use of rape as a weapon in war. Dr. Mukwege receives thousands of sexual assault and rape survivors in his DRC clinic. Nadia Murad is a Yazidi woman who was among the thousands used by ISIL as sex slaves. She now advocates for the Yazidi minority and women's rights. Both winners called on the world to do more to end the practice of rape as a tool of war. Dr. Mukwege also called for justice against those guilty of committing the sexual violations.
With this Nobel Peace Prize, I call upon the world to be a witness, and I urge you to put an end to this suffering that shames our common humanity. The people of my country desperately need peace.
Here in Kenya, a seminar on the 40th anniversary of Reform and Opening Up was recently held in Nairobi. The event, whose theme was Get Out and Get In, was hosted by the Kenyan Chinese Tourism Association. The charge d'affaires at the Chinese Embassy in Kenya, Li Xiuhang, and overseas Chinese from different industries attended the seminar. 5 Chinese who have been working and living in Kenya shared their extraordinary experiences of success and failure. They talked about the importance of reform and opening up policies for entering Africa, with a focus on Kenya's experience. They hope for continuous development of China's economy and the deepening of China-Africa relations through the program. Egypt has launched one of its most ambitious campaigns against hepatitis C. The country is looking to test its entire adult population for the disease. This is part of a grand plan to eliminate the disease in less than 5 years.
40,000 Egyptians die of hepatitis C annually. The country has the highest rate of the disease in the world. Now, the government is looking to eliminate hepatitis C by 2022.
The truth is that this initiative should have taken place much earlier, but it's good that President El-Sisi is doing it now. It's great, and since not all areas have hospitals, we will try as much as we can, namely by opening clinics that could help areas that are lacking. We've opened our church for the screenings this Sunday and the Sunday before.
Hepatitis C is caused by a blood-borne virus, which affects the liver. It is easily treatable if detected early, but can lead to liver cancer if left untreated.
I am here to make sure my health is good. I just gave birth. I don't want to harm my newborn son. I am very thankful for this campaign. There are many impoverished people who are unable to get tested on their own.
So far, 11.5 million people have been screened in the new campaign. The campaign is expected to run until April 2019. Astatal, CGTN.
Many towns across South Africa are fast running out of space to bury the dead. Population growth, migration to urban areas and an influx of foreigners has put huge pressure on land in urban areas. There's also a cultural resistance to the practice of cremation.
Between 45 and 60 graves are reopened for reuse each week on average to allow for second burials in Johannesburg.
People cannot buy land. It's very limited land, and there are a lot of people coming in, and there are a lot of people being born and so forth.
Authorities warn that if no action is taken to change how the dead are laid to rest, urban areas will run out of cemeteries in as little as 50 years.
Burial space is fast diminishing. This is caused by the fact that Joburg is currently experiencing high migration rates, both internally within the country coming from different areas, and both also externally for people coming outside of our borders.
Johannesburg also had an unusually high death rate in the 1980s, having been particularly hard hit by political violence and HIV/AIDS. And while recycling graves has helped ease the situation, cremation still faces significant resistance.
We do not believe in cremation. So now I think this reopening of the grave, it's a wonderful thing, because no one will complain that you are on top of me. You can even remove the flower. You'll never hear them complaining, because they have passed on.
However, for the young, cremation is not entirely a bad idea.
I think it would be helpful if people understood why people need to be cremated, because as it is, there's a problem with land.
Thank you very much.
But for now, the Sipamla family will bury 87-year-old mother and grandmother Caroline Sipamla in the same grave as her son.
Because this has been a pre-existing grave and it's nearer to where we are, we felt it would be easier for us to do a reopening, and it's cheaper. I don't want to lie. It is cheaper than digging a new grave.
Few black Africans are cremated in a week on average compared to dozens of burials. The increasing land demands of the living could mean that cremation and grave recycling could become mandatory. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
A recap of our top stories now. More than 160 UN member states have adopted the Global Compact on Migration at a conference in Morocco. Even though 10 nations have pulled out of the compact, the UN says others are still in consultation with their legislatures. The European Union has extended sanctions against DRC President Joseph Kabila's chosen successor. The measures include an asset freeze and a ban on entering the EU. The DRC's ruling coalition says the measures against Emmanuel Shadari are politically motivated. This year's Nobel Peace Prize winners Denis Mukwege and Nadia Murad have collected their awards in Norway's capital, Oslo. Both laureates called on the world to do more to end the practice of rape as a tool of war. And British Prime Minister Theresa May has called off the planned Tuesday vote on her government's Brexit deal. May cited concerns over the Northern Ireland backstop as the reason for the delay. The backstop is an insurance policy, she says, which removes border checks at the Northern Ireland border. And those are the top stories we're covering. Well, let's now go to Rama for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in business. Egypt's president champions African trade and investment within the continent. And the Tunisian Consumer Defense Association is warning about the levels of inflation in the country.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sue tonight. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. The 2018 Africa Forum has wrapped up in Egypt's Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh. A number of countries from the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, better known by the acronym COMESA, were in attendance. CGTN's Yasser Hakim was there. He filed this report.
The second day of the Africa Forum 2018 saw the presence of several African heads of states. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi delivered the opening speech at the presidential panel.
Our meeting this year comes at a time we are all looking forward to achieve more regional integration and facilitating intertrade, especially after the AU launched the Continental Free Trade Agreement during the summit in Nouakchott in March 2018.
The top officials focused in their speeches on the importance of promoting African trade and investments.
All African countries have one destiny and one goal. Therefore, they know very well that cooperation in trade and investment is very important. We have a population of 1.2 billion on the continent. There is huge potential for trade and investment that will transform African economies.
The leaders acknowledged there should be more government efforts to facilitate business.
Inter-Africa trade is only 11-12% of overall Africa trade. That needs to increase. If you look at the European Union, it's 60%. So this new Continental Free Trade Agreement that was signed early this year under the auspices of the African Union, I think will go a very, very long ways towards creating this inter-Africa, let's work together, not just the Pan-Africanism of the old days when African countries were going through the liberation front. Now it's economic liberation that we need.
And numbers speak for themselves. In 2017, 6 out of the 10 fastest growing economies worldwide were African, while growth rates in Africa are at an average 3.5 to 4% in spite of the international economic recession. And the delegations at the forum say the two main issues discussed here are improving infrastructure and the transfer of capital to reach African comprehensive integration.
The Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi will become the next African Union chairperson starting 2019. And through the Africa 2018 forum here in Sharm el-Sheikh, he's sending a message to the continent that he's going to be an active head of the African Union. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
The Pan-African telecommunications group Liquid Telecom has signed an investment deal of about $400 million in Egypt under an outline deal with Telkom Egypt. CGTN's Yasser Kim sat down with Strive Masihiwa. He's the founder and group executive chairman of Liquid Telecom's parent company, Econet. He filed this report.
We are a service provider. We're Africa's largest builder of fiber optic networks and data centers. Egypt has some of the largest African companies who want to access African markets. So this project is aimed not only at building infrastructure within Egypt, but also facilitating Egyptian companies that wish to exploit business opportunities in Africa, or that have offices in Africa wanting to improve their own connectivity.
Why Egypt?
Egypt is doing well. The numbers are there. If you're looking at a fast-growing, large African economy, okay, that has an industrial base, that is a gateway between, Egypt is the gateway to Africa, it is the gateway to the Middle East, it is the gateway to Europe.
How can it serve Africa in this project? It's not just serving one country, but how will Africa benefit from it?
Data is the new oil. Okay? Fiber is the railroad on which we deliver that oil. Okay? So when we interconnect African countries, that is the core to intra-African trade. Because intra-African trade isn't just physical roads. You've also got to have proper communications between these countries. So we are the arrowhead of that transformation of Africa.
It's been 10 years in the making. What are the challenges facing you in this project?
You know, the first 10 or so years in building this network were extremely difficult in terms of regulatory approvals and so forth. But I can tell you that over the last 3 years, it's been remarkably easy. I'm still breathtaken by just how quick they have been, just how strategic they have been, and how the support, we've had support for this all the way from the president himself, the ministers, the whole system has been remarkably efficient and accommodating. Why? Because Africans leaders, people like President Kagame, suddenly realized how important the work we were doing.
What's the next step and what's your ambitions in that?
Our ambition now is we've completed Cape to Cairo. We're now going from Port Sudan to Abuja. We're going to connect what we call Addis Abuja. We've now reached the border of Nigeria with the help of Huawei. We will be in Nigeria by the end of January. And then we're going to work our way to Dakar. So what I'm hoping is we will reach Dakar, Senegal by the end of next year.
Still in North Africa, the Tunisian Consumer Defense Association has issued a warning over the alarming levels of headline inflation in the North African economy. Purchasing power of at least 9 million people has plunged in the North African state. With this report, here's CGTN's Adnan Chouachi.
The National Institute of Statistics reports that inflation stabilized at 7.4% for the third consecutive month in November.
This stability is mainly due to unchanging price increases for most consumer products, except foodstuff, where the rate of increase has slowed from 6.3% to 6% year-on-year.
Analysts say the increase in food prices is slowing due to the stability in the cost of meat and edible oils compared with last year's sharp rise.
Core inflation is 7.9% and the consumer price index rose 0.7% in November after a 1.1% increase in October and 0.5% in September.
The Consumer Defense Organization has reported record increases in the prices of the majority of consumer goods over the past 8 years. Tunisians have bemoaned their low purchasing power, which hits the poor particularly hard. Many locals say their living conditions have deteriorated this year.
It's unacceptable that we have to pay more for the same products. Inflation has stabilized, but what about the future? It's uncertain.
The average salary of a civil servant or even a private sector employee does not cover basic monthly expenses. Each month, I borrow money just to survive.
The Tunisian Organization for Consumer Information has called for a public boycott on a number of highly priced goods. Activists argue that it's the only way to rebalance the cost of living. Adnan Shabashi, CGTN, Tunis.
On to Sudan now. Airfares in the country have risen quite a bit. That comes after aviation authorities ordered airlines over there to price their tickets in line with the new exchange rate. Now, the exchange rate of the Sudanese pound to the American dollar has been lowered quite sharply. Under the exchange regime introduced in October, the Sudanese pound dropped to about 47.50 to the dollar, from 29 Sudanese pounds to the US dollar previously. That, of course, has led to a surge in the cost of many goods and services in the country. Despite October's devaluation, the pound over there still does remain under pressure. And finally, onto the commodity that runs the world. Tanzania expects to harvest the most coffee in 6 years as better weather and a high crop cycle boosts output. According to the country's coffee board, output for the next season that ends next June may actually go up by 51% to as high as 65,000 tons. The board in April did raise its forecast for this season amid improved weather and a high crop cycle, and as trees planted in recent years added to supply. The Arabica variety accounts for roughly between 60 to 70% of Tanzania's total coffee output. The nation follows Ethiopia, Uganda and Cote d'Ivoire as Africa's biggest producers of coffee beans. All right, and later on in Global Business at the top of the hour, we'll be taking a look at Egypt's agenda on trade. The country is taking over the rotating chairmanship of the African Union in 2019. Where does Abdel Fattah el-Sisi want to take trade within the continent when he's in charge? We'll have some answers for you live from Cairo and plenty more at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including cartoonists converge in Brazzaville to celebrate graphic design and digital art.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
We cross over to West Africa now, where entertainers in Nigeria have taken to social media to create awareness on the dangers of drug abuse. There's major concern in the country about the prevalence of codeine cough syrup addiction. CGTN's Edmund Niabula tells us more.
Despite the government's recently imposed ban on codeine cough syrup's import and production, the number of addicts in Nigeria is still high. This has prompted entertainers like David Jones to use their talent to create awareness on drug abuse. Jones does a convincing job of pretending to be an addict on the videos he films on his phone and eventually distributes through his popular social media accounts. Jones himself lost a close friend to an opioid overdose.
Whatever you need to excel in life is in you. Yes, these things may enhance, performances and all that, but of course, it destroys, and quickly, and it messes up with your natural way of, getting things done as a human being.
For over a decade now, codeine syrup has been bought and sold in nightclubs, pharmacies, and backstreets all over Nigeria. In November, the Nigerian Customs Service seized a 40-foot shipping container with tramadol hidden inside over half of its contents.
Our intelligence is up and doing, and that is why we detained this container. And from the content, as we are seeing, these are tramadol. There's no doubt about it. The labels are there. And I was also explaining the systemic way of packaging. What they do is they package almost half of the container with something else, and then half of the container, right deep down, is the actual culprit drugs that they package.
Slim Case is another Nigerian musician using his lyrics and fame to spread messages about drug abuse. He was featured in a song titled Codeine Diet. He argues that the focus should be on the abuse and addiction, not the vilification of the opioids themselves.
You can't stop taking codeine. You can just stop taking it wrongly, because what if you have cough? So you still have to take serum, but abuse, the abuse is what makes it wrong.
The use of substances like cocaine, heroin and amphetamines is rising in West Africa despite strict drug laws. Countries that once served primarily as transit points for trade between South America and Europe are now active consumer markets. Edmond Nyabola, CGTN.
An international cartoon festival has concluded in the Congolese capital, Brazzaville. The event not only aims to promote Congolese and international graphic artists, it also celebrates creativity, cartoons, digital art and video games.
It was a festival that brought together several artists, including decorators and designers. Under the theme Graphic Mixings, the festival involved book signings, video games, varnishing exhibitions and film screenings.
Generally, people mix up cartoons and drawing. One man can be a draftsman without necessarily being an author of a cartoon. One can be an illustrator, a painter, a graphic designer. But cartoons interest me a lot because I love to direct characters around a story told in a coherent way. What interests me is to tell the subjects that fascinate me and also to live the characters that have.
So instead of throwing them in the garbage, I gave them a new life. My designs pleased people.
This year, the event also attracted many foreign visitors who came to celebrate African art.
What struck me the most is seeing African talent that is a little rare at the international level. During these 4 days, they have had at least the opportunity to put forward all their knowledge.
Since the launch of the festival in 2015, the Congo art and design field has witnessed tremendous growth. The founders of the festival seek to extend this event beyond the West African region. Ucheo Koronkwo, CGTN.
We have all the sport coming up after the break, including